In this video, I'm going to be talking about whether or not marijuana is beneficial to entrepreneurs or not. I am someone who has been an entrepreneur for about 12 years now, and I've been smoking weed for about 15 or 16 years was the first time, but I basically was permanently high for about 13 years. And it ended recently, about 3 months ago, where I stopped, and I've had a few phases where I've stopped smoking weed, so I'll talk a bit about those. This is going to be a more relaxed episode compared to most of my content. If you're subscribed, then you know this is not my typical style of content, but I think anything that relates to entrepreneurship, especially your lifestyle outside of entrepreneurship, is very key to be addressed, because if I can tell you how many Instagram hashtags to use and some tips on Reels, but if you and weed are still trying to figure out your relationship and whether or not you can just do it at night or do it during the day or not do it at all or stay permanently high all the time like I did for most of my entrepreneurial career, it is very difficult to not fix that first, or at least to get right with that. And the thing that I want to start off by saying is that your relationship with weed is different than mine and is different than anyone else's. So a lot of this is you coming to terms with your relationship with weed. Just because I'm going to tell you about mine and why I feel like not smoking at all is the right path for me doesn't mean it necessarily is for you, but I think you're going to be able to draw some inferences. And if you're watching this video, you're probably really debating on whether or not it is helping you in life or not. And I think if I would have caught this video even a year ago, I'd have been like, I probably wouldn't have even clicked on it in the first place, but if I did, I'd be like, I love weed too much. Like, I've always chosen to keep smoking, even when I've seen it as it probably didn't help me with that last sales appointment, but what am I going to do? Not be high? It was always something that I could never throw out, right? Like, I just enjoyed it so much. And I'm going to be talking about weed and entrepreneurship specifically. And if you want more information on like how to do it, how I was able to get over weed, then drop some comments and let me know. Maybe I'll expand on this video, or I will link. I just did an interview on the Sobriety University YouTube channel, and that was a lot more focused on how to actually get rid of your addiction, like some actual steps for doing so. But just weed and entrepreneurship, let's talk about this. So why is it beneficial, or why does it seem like it is? I would say for two major reasons. One, it increases your creativity, right? I don't think that the creative thoughts that you have on weed are not ones that you couldn't have otherwise. I don't think it's like, oh, weed gave me this crazy idea. It unlocked this portion of my mind that my sober self could never tap into. I don't think it works like that, where these ideas wouldn't have come to you otherwise. What it does, though, is it makes you more inclined to sit there and think. And this isn't always the best idea. Now, a lot of entrepreneurs are very innovative, and you can be sitting around thinking about your next business idea, what your next business moves are, your next advertising campaign, what your copywriting should be, your upsells. You can sit there and think to no extent about what your next business move should be. And a lot of times, this isn't the best use of your time. Once you've decided on your path, all you should be doing is working on that path. So a lot of times I'd be sitting around thinking, oh, I'm going to send this email and then I'm going to do this post, but I wasn't actually creating the content. I wasn't actually knocking things off my to-do list. So for that reason, it makes you entertain like your thoughts a little bit too long, is what I was finding. So even though I was working because I was thinking about my business and these were valuable thoughts, I would loop back around on them. I would start thinking a couple years in advance, and that's only healthy to a certain amount. There's a point that you just need to say, okay, so what do I need to do right now? I need to send an email. I need to film this video. I need to edit this video. I need to post it. I need to contact my assistant. There are a lot of things that you really just need to focus on just doing. And myself that was just more focused on let's knock out as many things on the to-do list as I possibly can is my sober self. And that's why it was very difficult for me to knock out the amount of tasks that I needed to do in a day while smoking weed literally throughout the entire day. So over those 13 years, I basically had no limits. I would just wake up, rip, and then like all the way throughout the day. Every hour I was probably taking another hit, so I would just like stay on that same level. And every once in a while, if I was like, I'm gonna film a video, I want to be a little bit more clear-headed, maybe I would let 2 to 4 hours pass without smoking, put in some eye drops, take a shower, chug a huge coffee, and then I would film a video. And it got very annoying to live your life like that, where you're always kind of planning everything around getting high. Even if you're like working at home and it's pretty permissible because you got no boss, you're still getting stuff done, right? You might not be getting it done as fast, but hey, you're having a really good time doing it. And part of the benefit of weed as an entrepreneur is because you can smoke weed and keep working, it makes you feel like you're kind of taking a break and working at the same time. Like you're like, I'm totally satisfied. I can just like keep working because like I'm high while I'm doing this. And what this usually does is that you work very slow, but then you work all day. So it feels like you were productive but you weren't really because you just weren't very focused. And even if you're like, yeah, I don't need the break, you still did need it and you just kind of took it while you were working. And I did this a lot in school. I think I had this habit of wanting some kind of gratification right away. Like I'd get home from school and I'd have a paper to write. So I would write that paper in front of the TV and I would just basically write nothing. Like every once in a while I'd get a sentence down. And then finally 8 p.m. would roll around. I'm like, okay, this is due tomorrow and I haven't written anything. Turn off the TV and then I'd get to work. And I needed that window of urgency to actually get myself to do anything. And you might relate to that if you are someone diagnosed with ADHD. Then that's also why weed has always felt like it's a good feeling. It almost makes you more normal. And this was the other part that I had to get used to, is that as an entrepreneur, like when I was basically like 60 days free from marijuana recently, I was just on such a grind, just getting stuff done. I was basically work out. That's my life. Like I work out, and then I wake up the next day and I do as many things on the to-do list as I can. I go get a really hard workout in, and that's my break. And then I come back, and then, maybe at the end of the day, I play some video games or I do something else as my break. But I didn't really need too much of one. And I was just very obsessed with my business. And I think when you are like that, and then you go to hang out with friends that, especially if they're smoking, and or you hang out with people, regardless of if they're smoking, the average person that has a traditional career and they show up and they work it, and then they have the weekends off, they're on a different playing field. Because even an entrepreneur on the weekend, if you're like, I'm going to take Saturday off, you know that at any point, as soon as your vacation mode is satisfied for that Saturday, that you can go home and you can do some things that are going to make you money and that are going to build your future. Or maybe you just read a book that's personal growth focused, or watch some content that is personal growth focused. You know that at any time you can dial back in, and you almost feel greedy, especially if your money's not exactly where you want it. You're hanging out on a Saturday with your friends and you feel like you're always weighing the opportunity of staying at the bar or staying out versus, or I could go home right now and like work 2 hours, right? And then say like I got my break in and then I like work 2 hours, and you want to do that, right? So there's always this thought of I could work more that is going on. And if you have a traditional career where you're scheduled certain hours, I'm almost envious of them because of this fact that when they're not working and they can't schedule themselves and they don't have a side hustle, that's it. Like they're like, sweet, like I am not working. I am present. I am going to do whatever I want to do. And I'm not on a time crunch. I don't have work tomorrow either. And then, that's what it is. It's a lot easier, I feel like, for them on the weekends to just be present. And as an entrepreneur, it feels weird to take any day off completely. I feel like when I go on vacation, even when I go abroad, I'm like, okay, well, I have my laptop. I still could do something. But once I'm in a new area, like I went to Europe last year, I was like, okay, never mind. Like, fuck work, right? So it can take a little bit more of a vacation for us to actually dissociate. I had a friend visit a week or two ago, and she came for 4 days. And the first 2 days, like I was on this 60-day tear that I was talking about right beforehand. I was still like in work mode. I was like, okay, maybe like while she's in the bathroom, I'll like edit a video. And I was like still waking up really early because I was like used to doing so, and I was going to the gym. And in the last 2 days, I was like in total vacation mode. Like it took me a few days of her being here, especially because I was still in my own state, for me to actually dissociate. And weed is a lot of times that gateway for entrepreneurs to be able to take a break, because otherwise you don't feel like you can. Especially if your finances could be better and you have like a lot of goals and you're like, I need to finish strong for the year. It can be very difficult to actually take a break, or when you do, it's so short-lived and you feel maybe guilty about it. And that's kind of why the weed could be beneficial. Joe Rogan talked about it on his podcast that for a lot of people that are really like type A, really high strung, high stress work environment, and they can't really dissociate when they get home, the weed kind of forces you to dissociate. It kind of forces your mind to take a break. And that's why it feels like, wow, this was really necessary a lot of times when you do it. For me, though, if I smoke weed at all, it is very difficult for me to either not just smoke it all the time or to think about it all the time. So, for instance, if I know, like, all right, as soon as 5 p.m. rolls around, you can smoke. It will be like 3 p.m. and I will then take to social media, or I'm more likely to do things like that. They'll just kind of like kill the time. I'm just like trying to bridge the time till 5. I'm like watching the clock, and then like 5:00, I'm like, sweet, I made it. It's never like, oh, cool, oh, 6:15, oh, cool, it's after 5, let me smoke. Like, that's not how it goes. And it would mean me, like, I wake up and I think, oh, it would be so great to be high right now, because like my favorite time to smoke weed is in the mornings. I usually don't wake up like ready to take on the world. I usually am up. I'm kind of a morning person, but it's difficult for me to like just start on my hardest task of the day right away. I kind of like to ease into it. And for that reason, especially when you wake up and you're a little bit tired, when you're not in this alert state and you're making your best decisions, then that's when like the idea that the weed somewhere in my house is available is very tempting to just, I'll just do that real quick. And as soon as I would smoke for the day, then now you either have this like kind of cloud around you like the rest of the day, and you kind of want to re-up like a couple hours later. Again, this is all subject to you. If you're like, yeah, I smoke in the morning, then I'm good. I don't need more until the next morning or like the next night. Like, that's you. I'm thinking about it the rest of the day if I smoke in the morning. So last year, my plan for getting rid of weed was actually not a cold turkey plan. I was like, okay, what if I just move back my time to wake and bake and see how that works? So in January, I did, all right, I can't smoke until 8 a.m. And then February is 8:15 a.m. And March was 8:30. And I just moved it back 15 minutes every month until I got to December, and it was like 11 a.m. But what I found out is, just like I was saying before, I basically just scroll social media until I could smoke. And this is something that is really big. I'll talk a little bit about just like, if you get rid of weed, what I found that happens is it just reveals your next level of addiction. And weed might be the thing that you're most addicted to. So let's say that you remove that. Now what you'll find is you don't typically replace like, okay, I used to smoke weed right now, which is very dopamine stimulating. Let me instead read a book. It's not usually how you replace it. You usually say, okay, well, let me like play some video games. Let me go on social media. Let me think negative thoughts, or let me think thoughts that are the craziest, like what's the most emotionally engaging subject that my mind wants to think about right now. And that was another thing, like, so it could be a substance where like, all right, let me like at least drink. Like, I totally did that. Or like, let me go buy a cigar. Let me go just do something. Like, you feel like there's this void of you have to do something that you have to fill. And you start replacing it with some other kind of addiction. And it could be one that you currently had, or you could kind of develop a new one, which would be the issue if you're like, well, let me pick up, cigars while I'm getting rid of weed. It's not the worst idea to get rid of weed to do so, because it's very hard to do it without replacing it with something. However, there is only one healthy drug out there, or it's not a drug, but only one healthy thing that you can get obsessed with that still does get you high, and that is fitness. So I think for getting rid of weed, it is nearly impossible to do it without you replacing your weed addiction with a fitness addiction. And part of this is because when you go outside and you run and you get to a point where your lungs are really active, then like that makes you not want to smoke. You're really in touch with your lungs and you're like breathing really deep. Like the last thing you'd want to do if you just ran for a long time, whatever that is to you, and you get back and you're just like panting, you're not like, give me a hit, oh, give me a hit, right? Like you don't want it at all in that moment. So that's part of like why it works really well. It makes you actually not want it, or at least like through that window after you finish the run, you won't want it because you just won't want smoke at all. And the other thing it does is it gives you a little bit of a natural high. But this is just something that you can get obsessed with that is healthy to get obsessed with. You can start going to the gym. I recommend every single day is what you would do to get rid of it. And that could be that you go for a run, that you go lift weights, that you do yoga, that you just walk, that you just do an ab workout. I would recommend you do something daily, every single day, because if you smoked weed before daily, then you're going to need to replace it with a daily habit. And I know there's like, you want rest days to take in the gym. So you don't always lift heavy, but if you can, like I do feel like you can always just switch muscles, right? Oh, well, just let me do leg day because my arms are sore. You can always just mix it up. And after a while, your body gets a lot speedier at recovering. So you can work out every day and it be totally healthy, even if like that day that you're just like, I'm so dead, let me just do 3 sets of push-ups at home and an ab workout. Like at least just don't post a 0 day is what I'd say. But back onto just the weed entrepreneurship topic. It is valuable in this way too. In entrepreneurship, a lot of times you are building something that will take you years to build and the payoff is not even guaranteed. So you could work at a business for years every day and it never come to fruition. You never even get the true dopamine from it. Maybe you got some sales along the way or some little wins that made you really excited. But for instance, I worked on an invention it was like an aquarium smart feeder. And I worked on it for 2.5 years with a business partner of mine. And we never sold a single unit. And, in the short explanation is the world, like it doesn't solve any problems. The world didn't eat it. Like fish can live for like 5 days without getting fed, and you can buy like $4 little feeder blocks. So they didn't need to buy our $100 automatic fish feeder that connects with an app and all this fancy stuff. We just thought, oh, it doesn't exist and seems like it should. So cool, we got a business idea. And it's funny because like when I tell people that idea, they're like, that's a good idea. I'm like, right? So I'd like stick with it even harder. And I worked on it for 2.5 years, doing something every single day on it. And we did a lot of other drop shipping and things like that in that aquarium market. So it wasn't like the only focus, and we did make some money. But ultimately, when that idea fell through, we closed down the whole business. And I was smoking weed that entire time while I was running that one. But I know how hard it would have been to quit at that time. It's really difficult to not smoke weed all of a sudden, and then you have no dopamine source. And for your dopamine source, it would be business wins. And what you might find is if you are trying to get rid of weed, that if you get a big order, all of a sudden you're like, cool, like I'm good. Like I don't feel like I need the weed like right now. Like, well, I'm still celebrating this win because your reward system got activated. But if you're an entrepreneur on the come up and you don't have sales coming in every day, then you're going to not have a dopamine source from that, and you're needing to work on it, and you're needing to be motivated to work on it every day very hard, and there's a chance that you might not ever get any kind of satisfaction from that business. It might just point you to the next thing. The failure is still going to be beneficial and all that stuff, but just as far as your dopamine neurotransmitters, they won't ever be satisfied. And that's why weed and entrepreneurship works so well, is because while you're building this business that may or may not work and you're not getting little wins, you can still fuel your dopamine addiction with weed. Okay, cool. Like I remember the first time that I took off smoking weed, I was working on that business, and I was working on a webinar that I would eventually run $10,000 worth of Facebook ads to sell one $1,000 course. And looking back, I'm like, I know exactly why it didn't work. And like, it's because that's very difficult to do. To sell $1,000 course where people just get videos from you, nearly impossible in 2023. This was 2019. And it was basically the end of people running free training webinars to sell you $1,000 course at that time. So it was a very difficult business opportunity to get in to start. And then I was very ill-experienced, and I spent all this money on it. So I was making no money. I spent like the rest of my money, and I went into debt because of it. And I wasn't smoking weed, and it wasn't working. And then my invention and my e-commerce company wasn't working either. So I was doing two businesses. Neither of one of the businesses completely closed down now. The other one I'm doing, which is this business, I figured it out, but it's not that offer that I sell. So I was doing an offer that would never see the light of day. And I was also going through the struggles of a relationship that had just ended a few months before. And then she blocked me, and I couldn't get in touch with her at all. So that really, hit where it hurt at that time, especially because I was like, okay, the girl that was working with me on these businesses and knew what I was doing, and we were good friends at least, she wasn't very supportive though, is ultimately why it didn't work out, especially when I was going into the weeds of these new businesses. Because when we met, I was already making six figures with my sales job, but then I was like, okay, cool, I'm ditching the sales job, by the way, because I want to figure out online marketing. And I ditched that income to make fucking no money. I made no money in 2020. So the first time I tried to quit weed was in 2020. Nothing was working in my business, my health, so my fitness. I was just starting to pick that up to help me out with the weed, but I wasn't passionate about it yet. And then I didn't have weed. I didn't have relationship going. I had no source of dopamine, basically. So I started doing, I started smoking a cigar. I started drinking every once in a while, but that just made me want the weed. And ultimately I just got really depressed. And after 50 days, I smoked weed, and I was like, oh my God, I haven't been really happy in 50 days. So that's why it really worked well with me at that phase of entrepreneurship for the day-to-day emotions, right? My day-to-day emotions were so much more positive, so much more happy because of that. The issue, though, is that the weed costs you a little bit of money. It's pretty cheap nowadays, but it also costs you the time of going to the store. It costs you the time of thinking about it all the time, whether you're on it and you're kind of processing your high, or you're thinking, should I get high right now? I was just always thinking, should I do it? Or wait, later I have to film a video, so I can't smoke after 2. But then as soon as I'm done with the video, I'd literally be stop recording, boom, finally. And then I'd edit it high, and then I'd be I need to re-record this part, shit. So I'm okay, dang it, I needed to wait to get high. And your life runs around weed, right? And you're slower. It's undebatably makes you slower. And the problem with entrepreneurship, like I was saying with that course that I was selling, that $1,000 course in 2019, if I came out with that exact same webinar, nothing changed about a year or two before, I would have made a lot of money on it. And it's because that opportunity was people were $1,000 course to make thousands of dollars, take my money. People were buying courses like they were going out of style at that time. Now at this point, everyone has bought some kind of online course that they never opened or wish they didn't buy. So to actually sell an online course, you have to do it perfectly now. And I had gotten started in the phase where you were just starting to have to be really, really freaking good. And I was brand new. I didn't have that many testimonials, and I was trying to get $1,000 from people who had never met me before, running my first ad campaign ever. And it totally looked like it. I didn't have a professional camera yet. I didn't know how to film properly. I didn't know how to speak on camera. I didn't know how to make hooks. And I still am working on all of those things, but I was way less experienced 5 years ago when I was doing this. So, but that same opportunity, if I was just earlier, I would have done way better. And that has been kind of the story with a lot of things, with a lot of offers that I've come out with since then. I'm like, if I had this a year or two before, I would have been crushing it. If I had right now my systems and courses and programs in 2018, I'd become a millionaire, and it wouldn't even be that hard. Even just coming out with podcasts that were like way shittier, there were so many more people listening to podcasts in 2018 than there are now. Like, it's not even close. And it's so funny that people think the podcast industry is booming. No, it's not. It's been pretty dead for a long time. People don't find new shows. My show was like growing so quickly when I first came out with it in 2018, the end of that. And then in 2020, it basically just like flatlined, and my subscribers on my audio podcast has been pretty much the same since then. People leaving and coming at the same rate. So it's like that opportunity ended. If I had started that podcast in 2012, I wasn't ready to at that time, but if I did, I would have been crushing it. So my point is, in entrepreneurship, there's very few businesses that you will open and it will stay open for decades. Most of the businesses that you will do will have their few years, and even if it is the same business, you will be selling something completely different all the time. You will be selling it in completely different ways all the time. And if you don't have speed on your side, even if you execute perfectly, if you don't have the speed component, the opportunities could leave you, right? Like, you could miss them. So being 10% slower, 20% slower, I would honestly say it's more like 40 to 60% slower that being high all day at the computer makes you. This is the difference of you making it in entrepreneurship or not. And over the last about 80 something days right now, I've been pretty much entirely clean. So let me just tell you about my one relapse that I had in here, because I wasn't expecting it. I was wanting to get to day 90, and it's kind of unfortunate at this point because I'm like so close to the day 90 mark that I said, like, no ands, ifs, or buts. You have to make it to day 90, and then I'll reconsult, if I can moderate it or whatever, even though I pretty much knew, like, all right, I'm not going to be able to moderate it. But from that trip that I had, that girl come out that I was telling you about, this is a girl that I've gotten along with extremely well while I was high in the past. And she lives in a different state, and we had been talking about her coming out for a while now. We finally made it happen, and she came out, and I was like, okay, I am like 65 days sober, and I'm keeping it that way. And she's like, okay, cool, I'm not. And, I live in Colorado. She got plenty of bud, and she was just smoking the whole time. And we were on completely different wavelengths. Like I said, we've always gotten along so well when we both smoked weed in the past, or, drank and just did all this whatever. We've only seen each other at weddings and bachelor parties before. So, you can let your imagination take it from there. But it was always, we're doing some kind of substance. And now that I was, coming off of a work spree, and I was like really focused, and I was like really looking towards the future, I felt like I was really on my shit, and I was like, I'm not smoking. Like, the first 3 days, by the end of it, I was so done with her. Like, I was not having a good time. And when I bring it up to her that I was like, all right, we're off, she's like, what are you talking about? We're having a great time. I was like, okay, I don't know how you're seeing it that way. And then I was just so fed up with her, and I was a bit drunk at the time, and she had left her joint, waiting in my car, and I was like, let me just, fuck it, I'm gonna hit this, because I'm just like completely fed up with this situation, and I'm like done with this. And all of a sudden, I started getting along with her really well, and I was like, oh, I see why you didn't have a problem before with just you sitting at the bar staring blankly and at the sky. And I'm like, oh, she must not be having a good time. And I'm like, oh, you were having a good time. I was just like, let's talk, right? Let's figure out what we're doing. Let's get a plan. And I was more, structured and sober. And then she was replacing half of her words with either fuck or shit. And then once I got high, I was like, oh yeah, like, just say fuck or shit if you can't think of the word. Totally. Like, everything made sense to me all of a sudden. And we had a really positive experience after that. And for that reason, it kind of made me think, okay, should I moderate it? And I think maybe if you can just do it in these random, like, I was at my buddy's bachelor party, I was in Mexico, and if you can do that, then it can work. But it just, I will say, like, as soon as she left, I was like the weed addiction voice was like, you can smoke a little bit, like let's go get a little bit more, while I'm still transitioning back to normal life. And I was totally just like wanting to do it really bad. And I went out and I got some weed, and then I smoked like 2 hits of it, and then I was like, oh yeah, never mind, this is why I can't do this. I'm like, this is nice, but then I got an instant reminder of me back in normal life trying to do it, of why this is not beneficial. And that's kind of what led me to like, I want to just make a video now that I have like the perspective and like the recent perspective of a relapse, of like, it really is not beneficial to entrepreneurship. It is beneficial for 2 reasons. It helps you have fun with innovating, but you'll stay in your innovator too long is the issue. The other thing is that it makes you okay with failing. And that is absolutely wonderful. However, the reason why you're failing is because you're working too slow. You are spending too much time in your innovator and not working enough. And you're just trying to take a shortcut to dopamine. And ultimately, the only thing that's going to make you super, super satisfied, because I would still label myself as depressed during that time, even though like my business wasn't working, nothing, like my relationships sucked at that time, no money, didn't know what I was doing. But then I'd smoke weed and I'd be like, okay, like this is manageable. I was still depressed because the weed was just giving me like this artificial little quick happiness, and then I'd just like keep up, right? Just keep it going. And it made me okay with where I was at. Like, I'm failing, but like, what am I going to do? Go get a normal job? Well, I can't pass a UA, so I guess that's off. Like, that's not an option. So I guess I got to keep going, right? So it kept me, never considering quitting. So like, that's beneficial for what it is. However, because of my slowed speed and focus and this voice in my head that gets activated, that is super self-conscious. Like, I feel like everyone has this to some degree. When you smoke weed, you become way more self-conscious. And if you're posting content online, like the amount of times that I would post a podcast and then I'd get high and then I'd be like, oh my God, like I don't like it. Like, I'd go back and re-record it, and I do it like a lot more monotone. Like, sometimes I get really into it. I'm like, get your fucking ass in gear. And then I'd smoke weed and be like, oh my God, like that was mean. Like, seriously, like this happened. Like, there's so many times where I went like back through to my content, or I'd do an Instagram post. It wouldn't be doing well. I'd smoke weed and I'd be like, oh my God, I hate it. And I'd like delete it. And then I'd get sober and I'm like, it wasn't that bad. And then I'm like, well, now what the fuck do I do? And like, I would second guess everything that I was doing. And you're never going to be like that great of a content creator, especially at the beginning. Like, you have to be bad at it until you're good, until you're great, until you're, killing it. And I kept like, if I didn't get the results that I wanted, then I'd smoke about it. Like, it would really like turn on the self-conscious voice, and it was enabling me to have more imposter syndrome than I should have had. And like, the voice that would happen, like the voice of judgment would kick on, and any kind of artificial high that the weed was giving me was like more than, drowned out by the voice that would follow about like judging my work and everything, and judging like my online presence, because it takes a lot of courage to like put yourself online. And when you start doing it and you don't really know how to do it yet, you're likely not going to love everything you post, especially the judgmental side of you, which comes out a lot more so when you're high. So for that reason, it's really not beneficial. And the reason why it was so tempting to me, like, I made it 70 days completely clean before that, relapsed with that girl. And then I was like, okay, let's get back on this train. The reason why it was so tempting to like just like keep in it, like after that little relapse made me like, no, let me like keep doing it, is because I finally got this taste of like a feeling of reward that I hadn't been able to get to, because I'm like grinding for 70 days. I launched a brand new product and I've gotten some sales on it. So like, cool, I got my reward. But this took a lot of focus and a lot of effort to get there. But it like, I had the idea in like February, and I didn't get first sales on this product until freaking September. So it took me 7 months before, I could order the product and get it. Like, before like sales could happen, it took 7 months. And that's why you have to have this patience in entrepreneurship, not with just don't work that much, just be patient, not like that, but be patient because the high that you'll get from the fruits of your labor are likely months or years away. And that is what is really tempting to smoke weed or do other substances while you're an entrepreneur. They are ultimately the thing that is probably making it so you'll never get there, though. And that's the issue. You have to say, okay, I'm just going to be okay, kind of getting through life and enjoying it as much as I can, and you'll get better and better at it. Obviously, like someone who has never smoked weed doesn't have this problem, right? You just have this problem because you know that weed exists. You know that you could at any time take the shortcut to just feeling okay, to just feeling content. So you have to get really good at just being kind of, depressed in a different way. But I would say that at day 70, I was like pretty much in the clear. I was not thinking about it at all. And I'm really excited to just get completely like back on like that level of streak again, because I know what's coming. And I know that it really is like eventually after you don't do something for that long, it just leaves your mind. You just forget that it exists. So I would say if you had to put a timeline on it, if you can make it 90 days cold turkey, you should be in the clear. Even if you've had very heavy usage, I think your dopamine receptors should be reset at that time. So ultimately for entrepreneurs, I don't think it's good. I think it's maybe the one thing that is holding you back from ever achieving your goals is slowing down your speed and your focus, even though you're getting this temporary feeling of achievement is what's happening, and you just have to be able to delay that achievement a little longer so that you can actually hit the real achievement with your business. So I hope you enjoyed this. Subscribe and check out the other videos on my channel if you like how I deliver content, and find me on Instagram at socialbamboo with an underscore at the end. See ya.